Hello everybody, Glitch Reaper here, and this is going to be something very special. As I promised before, I'm going to be doing kind of behind the scenes when it comes to mob battles. A bit of history behind how I got into it and everything, actually. This is going to be kind of very special. First of all, how I got into them was actually even before they were a big deal on YouTube at all, like even before Pat got into them. It was just playing the normal game back when there was pretty much just vanilla and seeing whenever some mob aggroed another one accidentally and then just fight each other. Like skeleton versus skeleton, which commonly goes down, and you just wait for one to take out the other, and then you take out the weakened victor. Just a part of regular Minecraft strategy. And things like seeing something else aggro on a skeleton whenever it shoots them accidentally, like say, a spider just jumping like crazy at the skeleton to take it down while the skeleton tries shooting it with arrows, meaning you got conflicting strategies there, and that's just vanilla. And of course, the original Witch War wasn't my mob battle on YouTube. It was just this thing whenever I was trying to get this witch hut to be renovated, and some of them got loose for a while and were just kind of out on the side, and one of them hit like a group of three of them, so it was like three witches on one for like a long time because they do have innate resistance to each other's attacks and anything similar for that matter. So it's kind of why witches are good specialists when it comes to combat, because they're really good at magical and anti-poison based combat and stuff like that. So just seeing them go at each other for so long, showing the ridiculous endurance they had against each other's attacks, was kind of an amazing run. And it just spontaneously happened. Like, but that was before I really had the capability to do anything on YouTube. And the thing is, I really did enjoy that kind of thing, just as it was. And Pat came along, aka Popular MMOs, and I just really liked watching mob battles periodically, whether or not I was the one doing them. And for quite some time, he was filling that in for me. Like, it was a thing. This was before there was, like, many other people doing mob battles at all. And so whenever he kind of retired from it, that was kind of a sign to me to say, you know what, if I'm having that urge for a mob battle, I'm just going to have to do them myself. And by that time, I actually had the ability to record them. So that's kind of how I got started in terms of doing them on YouTube, anyhow. But again, actually started way earlier, and sometimes even I'd experiment before that with various mods and things. But I just liked watching Pats for quite some time. But eventually, again, he kind of retired from doing it, and things kind of went my way. And also, some other people have popped up with mob battles. They may not be as frequent as I am, or as persistent at least. But the fact is, it has become more of a thing since Pat popularized it, and it was something that I think was in a lot of people's mindsets even before that, because a lot of people probably had the same common experience as me, starting off with just, random mobs doing things. And that was kind of how things began, actually. It was just a natural extension of the game mechanics. And here's another thing I'd just like to put up there. There's a lot of combinations that just don't work, and part of it has to go with basic mechanics versus modded, because oddly enough, vanilla actually has the concept of retributive AI better than a lot of mods do, actually, which is kind of weird to think about it. But it's just like the natural, like, if one mob gets attacked, it starts counterattacking, going, hey, you hit me, I'm going to strike you back thing. But for some odd reason, that's just not as much of a thing in some mods. And it's partially story-driven for some mods, and sometimes it's just, for some reason, some modders just don't get that natural aspect, that things become dramatically cheesable one way or the other. If a mod doesn't have that in its mobs, then they can get dramatically cheesable. Because I actually have tried doing some of the Dragon Ball Z mods versus the Wither before. Guess what? The Wither just pummels them because they have no idea how to fight back. It is bizarre. So if you want to see Frieza get whooped by a Wither, it is actually pretty easy. So you can cheese some things that way. Now, when it comes to some things that are story-driven, that may backfire because they may require an event of the player defeating the mob. but you could always just swoop in at the last moment whenever you know you have enough attack power to take them down. But this the fact is you can cheese these things that way, and of course vice versa can also occur. But usually vanilla actually has the advantage when it comes to retributive AI. It's kind of weird to think of it that way, and some things are just naturally more aggressive than others. And as for why some things are programmed to only fight the player, it's kind of because of, I guess you say it's kind of storyboarded that way on some mods. That they don't know what would happen if another mob interfered. They just think the player will be trying to struggle against them. They don't think of how the mobs will fight each other. And that's kind of an interesting oversight when you think about it, because if they don't know how to fight back, that's basically a freebie. Now, sometimes the mobs have a special defense that makes it unviable for things to really damage them, partially because of this storyboarding. Like, for example, players sometimes are the only ones that can fight a mob that they challenged. This is actually pretty prevalent in the Ether mod, where you go one-on-one versus a certain boss that you challenged. Like, the Valkyrie Queen has a special defense against those who have not challenged her. And the same thing was also true of some others. And of course, the Slider had a special defense where you could only damage it in a very particular way. And that's kind of why some don't work, is they can't really fight each other. They just kind of, one tries to attack the other one, but it doesn't even aggro it if it doesn't take damage from the attack, so they just kind of stare at each other awkwardly. With one trying to attack the other one going, hey, I'm here. The other one going, I don't see it. So it's kind of hilarious that way. And that is something that can pretty easily come up. Also, sometimes special defenses are just hard to overcome, but possible. Like, take, for example, Twilight Forest. It's well known for the Lich being very special. Let me see, do I have, is that, in this version, do they have it with the normal spawn eggs? I think they do. I think I got that registered in. Well, the Arcana RPG one's working. Okay, I guess they arranged it in here after all in this version. Just kind of forgot. But again, it's been a while. I am someone who jumps versions, though. That is something I can naturally do. And also, reminder, the opposite can also occur. You can have modded mobs that are very aggressive and useful. Like the Naga has been known to pretty much anger just about every mob in his path, except those that just can't be damaged by it for some reason. So that is a thing. Wrong one. Ah, there you are. I'm going to say big example here is the Twilight Lich. This thing has a special defense, and it's kind of an impressive one. Well, very few forms of damage can harm it when it's got its shields up. Pretty familiar with that, because you may notice I don't have very many mob battles with it, because most can't harm it, and therefore doesn't really trigger its retributive AI. It does have retributive AI. It's just something has to actually be able to really damage it before it starts going, hey, wait a moment, I should fire back. And in that case, it means it has to be able to start breaking through the shields. Of course, sometimes it'll fight something else, and that thing will also not do very much. Of course, again, you have some very aggressive ones. So let's just, for example, here, put out a Balrog from Lord of the Rings. Now, they're aggressive against everything that's not their faction. Or at least I thought it would try to challenge it. And this is another thing. Some things are mysteriously chill with each other. Like, this is an undead. Some things don't really deal with undead, for example, but they'll deal with other stuff. So, let's see here. What would be a good, really aggressive thing to do? Should I pop back to the whole Twilight Forest thing and throw off a Naga? Because I know that it probably cannot damage the Lich, but it will set it off. So just as a demonstration. See? It hits it, but it can't really damage it, because it's got a special defense that way. Now, some also have other things that they do, depending on whether or not they're actually aggroed by something, and that one's just wandering off, because it's... Sometimes it's just like that. Now, I will protect this village by disappearing these things on the wall if I need to. You see, this guy, he is trying to go after the Naga, so it shows the big difference between them pretty easily. And sometimes these things just don't work out because of that. This guy's stuck in a pond. Pathing hilarity can also. Have you been cooled off by the pond? I know you regen regardless, but you don't know what to do in a pond. Let me just let me just take care of that problem, okay? There, and no more Balrog standing in the pond being useless. And see, this is such a special defense that even the mob killer doesn't take it down. Then again, maybe I just wasn't seeing that completely. Next run. Okay, it does take out the shields one at a time. Okay, it can. It can. I guess it bypasses a lot of things then. But you kind of get my point that defense sometimes is the reason why things don't work out. And also sometimes they literally do not know how to fight back, or they don't fight each other unless, well, forced, which is sometimes the reason for using the Mob Enrager. But I do prefer, and as a rule, I prefer natural aggression first as to whether or not things will work. And sometimes even this doesn't work. Like there's some mods that have very special AI that cannot be controlled in this context, but can be controlled in other contexts. And it's like a hard program that you have to do something very special to change things. Like with Lycanized mobs, for example. A lot of them are very special. They have context-driven AI. Like you might have some as pets or some as summons, and some may just be in the wild, and that determines their AI and doesn't seem to be overridden even by mob enragers. Now, some of them may have natural aggression in some other ways and may set other things off, so they can still throw it down in mob battles. It's just sometimes you have to deal with these kind of weird consequences of how the AI works, and while I'm not knowing where that one Naga went, I'm just going to clear it out. So just kind of showing kind of how just the initiation can be a big deal. So when sometimes behind the scenes, I'm testing these things out to see if they actually even work in the first place. So that can be a big deal because sometimes it just does not work. Sometimes I just try on the spot and just see if it does because I think it will. Because some kind of seem to be that kind of naturally aggressive. But sometimes it doesn't work out quite how you'd expect, and things don't really go that way. And what's up with this whole? Did I forget some time where I smashed something earlier? Oh yeah, I think this is from that earlier experience. Okay, yeah. Now I remember what this was about. Yeah. I remember doing that not too long ago. Yeah. That was me using a big mech, and that's the thing is usually I have my mob battles just between the mobs, but I am kind of thinking of doing the actually controlling one as a mech thing sometimes, like I did before, which is basically the rule is I don't count entirely, I'm just controlling it, and if it gets knocked out, it gets knocked out. So that's kind of the thing on the idea of a mecha battle. And of course, there's cage matches where I lower the ceiling, literally, to make sure that things stay in close proximity when they may normally bounce each other around too far. It's not entirely natural, but with some mods and even some vanilla aspects allowing you to control where mobs show up, you can kind of arrange that naturally as well. So it kind of goes along with that being a thing. And you can kind of see my theme as preferring closer to how it would naturally work, even if it wouldn't normally be very often. Of course, I prefer natural aggression, but I am forcing because I'm kind of thinking of how these things stack up against each other in other ways. Kind of figuring out the score, basically, which is kind of weird because I actually took Rival Rebels out temporarily to make sure it wasn't interfering with stuff, and I still am on a scoreboard. Uh, it's kind of funny how that works because that was a special vanilla mechanic and it's already been preset with all its properties, so it's still there. It is. I didn't plan that. It just happened, but that was a good segue. Anyhow, the thing is that I have been thinking about how these things score up with each other, in more than one way. Like, for example, the Wither is a fighting machine. It can take down a ton of stuff, sometimes multiple in a row. And there's also things strong enough to just absolutely nail it. Now, back in this version, we didn't have too many options of things that were really like what I'm considering at base value. Witches or something I do kind of consider to be a bit of base value, actually, and for an interesting reason. I kind of have various categories of mobs that I consider basically to be kind of worth points in the back of my head. And possibly, I guess you could scale that in other ways. But I have it thought out that there's certain base categories. You've got, I do have this on normal, right now, don't I? Yes, I do. Guess not much is spawning in right now. Oh yeah, I did. I think I may have turned off mob spawning at some point, so yeah, that may be a reason why everything's so quiet, is I may have turned off mob spawning. Well, forced ones from structures obviously show up, so the villagers are still here. Hi everybody. Don't mind the giant explosions in the distance. I am trying to keep them from being close to you. You should be fine. You should be fine. They shouldn't be exploding too close. You should be okay. So don't worry. Okay. So I had to make sure that that was still working for a moment. But anyhow, I've got different categories. One thing is actually something I do believe has been this far back in vanilla. I'm trying to remember, was this something as far back as 1.7.10? Come on. Just like to have one of you here. Be a special spider and demonstrate what I mean. What was that? No, that was just one of my own particles. For a while I thought they were worth special ones. Not seeing any special ones here. Mainly it's a low chance. I think it might be higher in higher difficulty settings, so let me maybe crank it up a little bit. And see if that ups the chance. I also tend to go with normal most of the time because I consider it the intended difficulty of the game for most purposes. So I also consider it to be the basic balance. Come on, I thought there was a higher chance of getting a special one. Or was this even back then? It would be hilarious if I got the legendary invisible spider first. But you get what I'm trying to do anyhow. The fact is, I'm trying to get in a special spider. One that has a special effect. Things that are kind of out of the norm, but something that can happen, those are ones I kind of consider champions. Kind of like the Thaumcraft terminology there, but also some other games have adopted that term for otherwise regular opponents that have special abilities, and may also have better rewards. Oh! This also goes right into my next statement of one I categorizing as being a base... darn, I don't know why I was suddenly going into an accent. Of having a base value. And this goes into the idea of cavalry. The thing is, champions may be like special versions of an otherwise normal mob, but we also have cavalry. Cavalry is those that are one mob riding another. Usually, but not always controlling it. I mean, we know that the spider is the one in control when it comes to these kinds of cavalry, when it comes to these spider jockeys. And this is a rare sight indeed, because this is a fully gold-equipped skeleton. I mean, he doesn't have an enchanted bow, but he's got some extra shiny boots. I mean, okay. Yeah, you're demonstrating the concept of cavalry. That's something I consider a base value of being basically worth a point. Just because it happened. And the same thing's true with champions as I was going with before. But also, there are others. I don't know if it was back at this point. I think it may have been that zombies could have a special leadership status. And it's something that you rarely saw, but those were the zombies that basically were a bit tougher than normal and could call in extra zombies whenever they were attacked. So you could kind of call that a form of champion, but other forms of leaders also exist later, including just whoever so picketh off the ground the banner. When it comes to the Illagers, because they will also have what they consider captains, and those are basically a kind of leader. They're just the one bearing the banner, which has its own implications in other ways, and it often starts the raid. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of a special property, but it's still for a slightly different reason. They don't have any special combat abilities, but they're still a leader. And so I consider that kind of being something of base value, and I am probably just not going to get an impressive spider anytime soon, even while I'm talking about the 3 groups. And of course, it literally, whenever I said that, it showed up. The legendary Invisi-Spider. Okay. You can still see the eyes, because they have that special property. So this is a champion spider. It took me a lot to get this one out, but I finally got a champion spider. This one has invisibility. Some spiders have strength or speed, so they can show off in other ways. And this can also apply with cave spiders, but it's more well known in normal spiders. So asterisk on the normal quote there. I mean, this one's an invisible spider, so yeah, they're certainly the most noticeable of the type in terms of how dramatically different they are, because you just see the eyes out of nowhere, and that's it. So all you see is the incredible invisible spider with eyes out of nowhere. So yeah, that's kind of a thing with those. You have your champions, like Invisi-Spider. You have your jockeys, aka cavalry. And of course you have your leaders. So those are some base value things, but they're not as predictable as others. Like, things that are... Did you actually go through the entire durability of your helmet? Oh well, that's one thing about armored undead, is they actually use durability of their helmet to keep them from burning, and then they start burning. So it's just a matter of time. And now that is no longer a jockey. So... Cavalry, no more. Well, your extra special status was fleeting. Anyhow. Let's kind of clean up the area with just a Naga just taking out the spiders. What is it with the Naga going that way? Okay, never mind. I will just get rid of them all. I've done my thing about the different minor categories that are less predictable, but yeah, I've already said what I needed to say there, so I'm good. Okay, then you go with other categories that are a bit more reliable. Like, for example, we get to, well, things like the Naga, which are full-on bosses. You also get things that are mini-bosses, sometimes designated by the modder in their lore, sometimes by Mojang as a mini-boss, like Elder Guardians, for example. They're officially a mini-boss. And, of course, with mutant creatures, they're kind of considered to be mini-bosses by the original author, and have been in the lore of the mutants ever since. They're basically mini-boss versions of the other mobs. You also get those that are just very powerful and just show up. Those are the elites. And they're ones that I consider like having a natural or repeated spawning condition, and they can take on others pretty well, including things of other categories like, for example, mini-bosses and bosses. So then you go with that. Now let me see, what would be a good thing to let a Balrog just rampage with? Maybe I should go a bit more classic. Maybe I should see if they're able to be taken down by an iron golem. Just as a demonstration. Just making sure. Remember, these are old school iron golems, so no sideways building here. This is 1.7.10. This is before they upped that. That's a thing that you could do. Balrog. Oh, this one has the whip. Are you actually gonna target this Balrog? Again, sometimes you get these unexpected things that just don't really work when you think they would. But this Balrog isn't even bothering this Iron Golem, and vice versa. This I was not expecting at all. I mean, why? Why are you two so chill? I mean, sure, you could roast this guy over time, but you're not trying to. Do I need something a little more pizzazz, perhaps? Okay, let me try something with a little more oomph to it. I know you tried the Naga and it just went away before you could finish it off, which I also have under my general mob terminology of mobs forfeiting or getting ringed out. Which is like basically them going out of bounds, either of their own accord or being smacked out by the other one. So that is also a thing. And it's kind of the opposite of a cage match, because cage matches are confining. Will you attack a witch? Are you just attacking players and Lord of the Rings mobs that aren't in your faction? Which is, like, just about everybody? Is that it? Are you literally just not going to do diddly just because you don't have a reason to? Well, okay, we're going to unnatural aggression just to demonstrate things. Wow, it dashed in quickly. Oh, ended it with a whip. Okay. See, there's part of my point of sometimes you just want to see if they can handle something. Like, for example, a witch can also take down some things, as I've already demonstrated. They're kind of a specialist at it, but they're also a kind of elite. Because they just show up. And yet, they can do things. See, now I got them going at it. Now, Iron Golems also qualify. I mean, they've been known to battle pretty much anything, and sometimes they can take down mini-bosses, even full bosses from various mods. So, Iron Golems are no joke. And it has been defeated by this Balrog, but it was down by more than a third of its health. Like, Balrogs do have regen, naturally, but this particular demon from Autumno, you're probably not going to see it very often, so if you ever go there in Lord of the Rings, be very, very geared, because that thing just smacked an Iron Golem. And note, in this version, you can't stand behind the Iron Golem and feed it iron, so you wouldn't be able to back up your Iron Buddy there, so just saying. I mean, could I have kept healing it with the mob healer? Yes, but I was also just trying to see if this one could beat an Iron Golem, so I wasn't going to. Because that was totally not the point. And it was also just demonstrating that sometimes something can beat something else, and you know that it's already a bit of a deal. Now, there's also things that are kind of like this that I like to consider terror units. And that also includes Iron Golems. And yeah, I think things can have more than one category there. But what's a terror unit, you might wonder? Well, it's kind of a terminology that comes from the XCOM series. I don't see it used much elsewhere, but it kind of illustrates the point. A terror unit is usually a more powerful, tough, incredible fighter in its faction. It fights for a cause, for a faction, for a group, but it's not necessarily the leader. It may not be the most intelligent thing, but it certainly is one of the best fighters. It's what they bring in when they want to just wreck things. That's a terror unit. They are an instrument of terror and destruction for a particular group or cause. And this also happens in Minecraft. Just think of iron golems. They fight for the villagers, naturally sometimes. So they're basically the terror unit of the testificate villagers. And you have the Balrog. It fights in the name of a Tumno. Yeah, you may not see the leadership of a Tumno, but they're around somewhere. And these guys aren't really it. They're just the elite fighting corps. They're the ones that show up when everything else is not quite sufficient. So this is a terror unit. And this is a Balrog specifically. And this is me whacking one because I have a weird hitbox, so I have to hit low. But you kind of get the idea of what I'm calling a terror unit. And that is something kind of... that also brings me to the point of the Warden, is that it is a terror unit for the Skulk. The Skulk is overall an intelligent network, and the Warden fights for it. It is its living weapon. So whenever I unleash the Warden, I'm using a terror unit. Whenever I unleash a Balrog, I'm unleashing a terror unit. So helping to describe that point. Now this area is not very good for the concept of a ring out, but if I happen to go close to the gorge, then yeah, you get the idea. What if it throws it off a cliff, but it somehow survives? Well, that's a ring out. It's no longer going to be able to fight. It's out of bounds. It's just not happening anymore. So you kind of get the idea that something could be bumped off, maybe in the end, or maybe I've just constructed a ring in a void world. You never know. But something like that could be something that's in common later. I mean, again, some units can't fully take each other out. I mean, it may not be that they can't damage each other, because I use that as kind of partially as defining the fight. Can they try to attack each other, at least? Will they damage each other? Maybe, maybe not. But if they could push each other, then it's kind of like a sumo match. You could just declare who pushes who off first, and then call it at that. So you could do it as kind of a conception that way. So there's more than one style of mob battle, that some of which I haven't even fully used, but I've kind of mentioned along the way that I call things a ring out. So there's that. Now there's also, of course, other events that can happen during a mob battle, but that is another part of it. Now you're also probably thinking, well, there's also tiers of them, right? And yeah, I mean, there's even kaiju class mobs. They're definitely only in modded. There's nothing like them in vanilla at all. And there's also keepers, things that guard a particular resource or location and aren't really renewable, like shulkers. And also kind of like piglin brutes. They guard a location. Shulkers guard both a location and special resources. And you kind of get the idea that evokers are like that too, because they guard the totems of undying. But when it comes to kaiju, there's nothing really of that massive city-wrecking size level in vanilla. So yeah, that's only going to be in modded mob battles, period. They are way on their own. That's definitely a thing. But they're also often such high damaging creatures that they often are in some of their own tiers. And like they have humongous health pools, they have tremendous attack power. So yeah, they may do some serious things. Let me just do that just cause. But yeah. What is it with the Nagas and just abandoning ship recently? I mean, it's just, I don't get that part. They just leave. It's also one of the reasons why you may occasionally build a confining arena. Naga, oh dear, Naga just leaves. It's like, yeah, goodbye. It's like, I'm not actually fighting this. Goodbye. It's like, yeah, I've people have seen Iron Golems beat Nagas before. We know this how this goes. So I think the Naga decided likewise. It's like, I know how this ends. I'm out of here. So it's like, I forfeit. Goodbye. But yeah, as I was saying, you do kind of get tiers. Like, as I said, you got some things, base value things I consider just innately worth it, and like anything designated as a boss, like anything with a boss health bar, I automatically consider to be worth it, like, of course, the Wither. So there's always going to be things like that that are just, by definition, considered something special. Now, let me see here. Do I want to... do I want to throw a little something down from here? Maybe. Just maybe a little dragon on Balrog action? Just cause? Like, no particular reason? Hello, dragon. Can you get rid of this demon for us, or do I have to just kind of aim you at it? But yeah, and now some bosses do kind of stealth their health. Like, they don't have a boss health bar, but they're still defined as a boss. Usually in vanilla, as long as it's done correctly, it will have a boss health bar. Even in mods, that's usually part of the definition, is it has like a special class in the code that designates it as a boss and gives it a health bar. But some things defined as bosses, either in the lore or otherwise, hide theirs. So even if they had one, they're like, nope, I'm not actually displaying it. Like, this is, he's trying to attack, but it's not working. This is another example of it's not working. He's like he's trying to. It's like he's bouncing on top of him. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to roost on this guy's wings, but it's not working. So you just get some situations like this where it's like, really, this is how it goes. I do think this is kind of funny. If I were to interrupt this by just standing here for a second, what would happen? Not much. They track way too fast. Okay. That was an interesting and spontaneous experiment that went absolutely nowhere. Oops, overshot. What? I put it on peaceful. How are you not... Like, how are you still there on peaceful? It's not supposed to happen. Also, sometimes you get things that just are never quite... Okay, you just go there. Okay. Quite programmed right to go away on peaceful. That happens too. If you want to just roost in a mine shaft, then you do you. Okay. Well, there goes the dragon. So that was interesting. But yeah, the idea of what beats what has been in my mind for a while, and I've done it on kind of a tier-based system for a while. You got your normal things that are kind of at the base of the line, and then you have things that can beat them regularly, maybe even indefinitely. In which case you think of them as worth at least 10 of that, maybe an indefinite amount. And yes, I know not everybody thinks in like multiples and divisions of infinity like I can, but it's something where I can designate things in those kind of tiers. Although you can kind of, for simplicity, think of it as like a 10x system, kind of metric. Like, for example, let's say that a wither can beat an indefinite amount of witches. I mean, sure, that is a thing that happens, but the witches don't really have much of an ability to beat them, but they can beat an indefinite amount. They may try to attack the wither back, but that means that they are in fact fighting, but at the same time the wither will just always win. And at the same time you also have times like, oh, say, let's go back to the whole Twilight Forest routine with the Twilight Lich. Because we know that that's a special situation. But we also know that sometimes magic can, in fact, pop things through, so... Lich, witch... Yeah, they definitely hit themselves. Can you actually damage the shield some? Can you throw like a harming potion, please? Okay. Poison doesn't affect him because he's undead. Just saying. But yeah, they try. Yeah, like the Twilight Lich would totally beat the Witch, and that just kind of gives you a base of, well, if you don't have anything else to go by, you can go, well, at least it can beat something that's considered worth it. Of course, there's bigger things than that to go by, and like an Iron Golem can beat a pretty good amount of them. But at the same time, you'd have to heal up the Iron Golem to say that that it could just keep doing it, when normally that's not really the case, because they don't heal on their own. A Witch, however, can heal up on their own. Now, they may not beat an indefinite amount of something, but they can certainly try. And they can heal themselves up in between. Let's try something else. Now they're kind of going into a bit of a three-way fight. At least something's happening. But yeah, this guy's gonna say the concept of what beats what goes into tiers. You get kind of your baseline of, well, it's a boss, so it's worth at least something. Even if it's a low-tier boss, it's a boss. So kind of like how Nagas do in fact get themselves beat by a lot of things. Somewhat regularly, might I add, which is kind of weird, but at least they set things off on their own as well. And then, of course, you get things that are worth, like, a true tier up. Like, okay, they got past the shields. Or maybe it had enough explosions nearby to take off its own shield. The witch has declared, I'm out of this. Don't involve me. This is between you two now. I think the Lich may have taken down his own shield by just the nearby explosions. But yeah, I got things into kind of things like, say, extreme points. Super extreme points, mega points, just basically tiers above tiers above tiers. And by the time you get to something like the Queen, which is absolutely crazy, you get to some pretty high tiers of that. So you can just go one metric after another after another. So you can kind of see how that just keeps going up in scale. Now, there's also other concepts, like, well, how do you gauge something with a new mob that's no longer going up in version? Like, how about these things that are kind of stuck behind? Like, I haven't seen Arcana RPG advance in, like, quite some time. You are just, like, on fire forever, aren't you? I will relieve you from your fire. And also, in the lore, that's considered a mini-boss, even though it has a boss health bar, so, well, in the code, it's technically a boss. The lore says it's a mini-boss. So just saying that they can have their own categories for things like that, and yeah. That's something that may get a little murky sometimes. It's what is just the base version. It's like, yeah, it's how they consider it. So they consider it a mini-boss, it's a mini-boss. But, as I was saying, it's how do you gauge something that goes between different versions compared with something that's kind of stuck? Like, for example, we do have the Lava Troll, but we also have ones that have gone up many times, and of course, base vanilla also has things, so this is where you get the idea of how to gauge things farther on. Use a standard candle. Use something that's been in the game for quite some time and still going up. So, for example, an iron golem. I'm building a lot of iron golems today. That's definitely been a thing. So, the lava troll, it hasn't gone up in version for quite some time, but you can have it fight the iron golem. And it is definitely doing heavy roasting, even though it's taking a lot of damage itself. But you can tell now that an iron golem is stronger than a lava troll. And that one dropped a nifty sword. Okay, thank you for this sword. It's like, yeah, that's toasty. Okay, that's a toasty sword. But on the other hand, knowing that an iron golem is stronger just shows you the iron golem is stronger than that. But what about something else? Can you tell if it would be stronger than something else, maybe? And it would maybe also keep on going? Like, again, with the whole witch idea, although that one just kind of abandoned ship, so that's not as clear in 1.7.10. But you can also do things like withers. Like, what's a wither stronger than or able to be beaten by? There's a lot of things. I've definitely thrown off a lot of withers over time. And that's one of the reasons why, is they're kind of a standard candle. They keep going between versions, so you can kind of use them to compare. Even some very advanced modern mods, like, say, Ice and Fire with their dragons, you can compare because the Wither has been in the game for a really long time, and so is the Iron Golem, etc. So, for example, there's some things that they just keep on going. They just do keep on going. And there's, of course, things like nice mobs like that. I don't know if some things were in this version, because he did some things much later than others. I mean, Ray of Art's here. I mean, that's something to remember. But I don't think some others were. Like, I don't think most of the dragons were in this version at all. I think those were all added later. And that also brings up part of that point, is to what happens whenever something is in a later version, but not really in an earlier one. How do you compare them? Like, here's a fight I haven't done before for comparison. The Zoator. They fight in a similar way. They've been remodeled a few times, but they fight in a similar fashion. Like, they have the habit of going into a defense mode. That one did not have much health, partially because he also added a leveling system later. So it also shows that they do sometimes change over time completely. So that means that one can't be as factored in, but you know an Iron Golem is stronger than a Zoator in its basic form. And they don't have much back then. He really beefed them up over time. Like, now they're more considered a dragon. Back at this time, they were just kind of chilling out on the plains. That one also did a lot more damage to the Iron Golem this round. But let's also compare with a witch, because again, witches have been around for a long time. So if I spawn a Zoator over here with a witch, we get a different story, just right there, between things that's been in the game for a long time and not. Okay, I may have to prod you a bit here. But either way, just getting your face started. Also, witches are famously weak to rush down. You got stuck on grass. You literally got stuck on grass. And sometimes terrain factors in, like getting cornered. This witch isn't gonna fare well just because it got cornered. Yep, she's totally cornered. This isn't gonna last long. Zoator has taken poison damage, but the witch is cornered. Can't really heal. did get herself out of there, though. Now that defensive posture, that really helps out. Zotor can really defend for that. But witches also can heal. They heal with their potions. Decided to go offensive again. Trying to wait out the poison. This defensive posture defends against pretty much everything. It got a big potion to the face. A couple times in a row, actually. This was really slowed down in the water, and this also shows how the change of environment also matters. Though some are just more specialized for water, and these my aquatic mob battles I sometimes do. Some things are just better at swimming. But of course, this is also an old-school Zoator. It's not really like this anymore. They've changed. Now, their fighting style has remained, but they have much more HP. However, this is also one you can kind of estimate by the attack pattern. Is because a witch will heal periodically, and these guys just defend periodically, but they don't exactly heal. But the rate that they decide to attack, will they take down the witch before the witch takes them down? Finally did. It's barely anything left. You were able to finally get the idea of how witches are weak to rushdown. Congratulations. So now you know a Zoator, even in the classic form, can beat a witch. So it can happen. It may not, but it may actually do so. So even just doing that again, you can kind of see that it could be a different story. Now, they've also changed some of their aggression over time. Oh, I did that too close to the golem. Yep, that witch is also a gunner. Yeah, you should not have let that come too close to the golem, so oops, that was on me. I forgot how close I was to that one, so yeah. Try to get a further spot here. Things happen. Things do happen. I also think the aggression of Zoators have gone up over time. Like I have some serious custom AI going on, and you should note that again, that factors into how some things work, and it has improved over time as well, so things are a little different than they used to be. Wastes off the poison, and the witch heals while that one's defending. Food racket. But yeah, you can see also sometimes things are a bit more chaotic than cut and dry. Sometimes they don't always go quite the way you think. But there's sometimes little miscellaneous factors, like the witch getting pinned against a wall, or just getting rushed continuously and it decides not to defend for a while. So there can be a little RNG based in mob battles, even if they have fairly defined AI. So it happens. Like this time I have a feeling that it might go the other way. If this guy defends periodically, the witch might win. But yeah, so you can kind of see how things change over time, or you get new ones entirely. But some stay the same. Like witches pretty much just fight like witches the whole time. They may occasionally have a new potion considered in. But overall, a witch is a witch. Iron Golem's an Iron Golem. Although admittedly, the Ender Dragon has changed seriously over time, and that's its own thing. That really is its own thing. I mean, now that you get that special version of how the Ender Dragon paths, when normally it didn't really have to care, things have really changed on that one. So now you can actually kind of guarantee things to be able to try to fight the Ender Dragon when you couldn't before. But because of its special properties, it can be a little tricky, actually. So you'd be surprised even how big of something you can take down with the Ender Dragon. So you also get changes even in vanilla of behavior of various mobs over time. But you can still pretty much go with the standard candle approach. So you can kind of think of that as a way of gauging mobs that have gotten stuck in certain versions, even if you don't have much ability. Now, to be perfectly fair, there are some that just, for one reason or another, files have gotten corrupted over time or just don't work with certain versions anymore when they used to. So you can have that being a thing too, where they just literally don't work anymore. See, I knew the witch would be able to... Wow, that was also just as narrow. They both ended up with 2 HP left whenever they finally won. So, yeah, it shows sometimes things can be about equal and go down to the wire. So, yeah, that was something. But yeah, kind of using that as a standard candle approach is an idea. Whether it be a witch, an iron golem, a wither, or something else. Just something that's usually found more in vanilla and has kind of just kept going on. So there's also been some that have skipped versions over time. Like recently, Grimoire of Gaia has updated, and it skipped several versions in between, including 1.16 currently. So that happened, and there's a few others that have also updated. So whenever you're checking around for things like Twilight Forest, just know that, yeah, some are more persistent than others in going with every version that they can. Some will skip, and to gauge the stuff in between, sometimes you gotta go with a special approach. It's just something that kind of happens. So, yeah, I've got my system of just what's at least worth a point. And that's things like, say, mini bosses, full bosses, terror units, anything that can beat anything in that category is automatically worth at least that much. So you get elites, and of course you also get other things too that are also just worth it because they are. Sometimes that's unpredictable, but sometimes it's pretty reliable. Again, anything that's considered a boss is at least a point. After that, it goes to how many something can take down, either sequentially or all at once, or if it's an indefinite thing, like just it can just keep going forever, like things that can self-recover, like the wither, witches, etc. They could be considered as taking down an indefinite number. Sometimes even simultaneously. I've seen the wither literally take down just a bunch of things simultaneously because it has a multi-targeting ability that not very many things in mobs mods do. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of special. And I've seen the Ender Dragon just take down armies because of how it fights differently. And that can be unique. So it just keeps on going because it just repels things so much that they barely ever hit it. And of course, there's whether or not you have the Ender crystals on for the Ender Dragon because it would just heal tremendously, and so things that barely hit it will just basically be like they never did. So it could just take down armies. And that factors in with some things, like some things have too high of regen to really be concerned, like Mobzilla from Orespawn. That thing has so much regen, it's ridiculous. Some things literally can't do enough damage at once, even if Mobzilla didn't have that much of an armor rating, and its regen is so high that it just regenerates that all off in like one shot. So it's like sometimes there's just like no way something can really win against something else, even if they do initiate a fight naturally and do have the ability to at least hit each other and consider it a hit. Even if it's like no damage, at least they're hitting each other. And sometimes it's just like no way, like one just dominates forever. So you can get these indefinite numbers as well. And that's kind of how that system works, is you kind of go up from what's worth at least something and figure it from there. But you can sometimes get times where it's just like the number's just arbitrarily large. But for that, I think, yeah, simplify it if you want to put a number on it. If you want to put a regular non-infinite number on it, simplify. You could just say times 10. Times 10's okay. Like, unless proven otherwise times 10. You know? Like, oh, say, 20 withers taking down one really powerful mob all at once. Yeah, that would be a thing. And if like a few other withers actually tips the scales over, then yeah, it's worth 20 withers, but not necessarily that many more than that. So you can kind of get a point there. So what's a wither worth? Surprisingly a lot. There's a lot of things it can take down tremendously easily. Withers really are just an engine of destruction from vanilla. So yeah. And they do have natural regen and a bit of a regen boost whenever they actually hit something directly. Something a lot of people forget is that they will get a natural extra boost of regeneration whenever they hit something directly with their projectile. So you got to keep that in mind too. That while they're barraging something, they're healing more. It is something that they just do. And that's kind of another factor there. But yeah, sometimes things do and do not work out. So you can kind of see how I do things behind the scenes, and you can even see for yourself sometimes that sometimes they just chill. That they don't actually fight each other. And if you have two things like that that also have the AI problem, where sometimes they're not programmed to fight anything other than players, or they're only programmed to fight in particular reasons, they will both stand there no matter what you do. So sometimes you get ones that just do not work. Iron Golems, they do have a lot of programming as to what they consider combat conditions. So it's good to use an Iron Golem. It's good to use a Wither. They'll fight anything non-undead, pretty much guaranteed. Now, whether or not something can be damaged by them is another story entirely, but they'll at least try. So you kind of get the idea where that comes in, and why I kind of honor the vanilla mobs more than you would normally think is because vanilla kind of has it right on some generalized aggression sometimes, and retributive for that matter. Like they are really good at, if something gets hit, it fights back. So it's like, yeah, that's just naturally a thing to consider. And I don't see that as in some mods sometimes, and it's kind of funny. I'm going, but this is just something you just see in vanilla all the time. Why is this not working here? Are they so story-driven they're not seeing another mob just show up randomly? I mean, that can happen on its own sometimes. I mean, for example, you have a... Okay, let's just say you fight a little too close to a village, and hey, here's an Iron Golem. Hi, how you doing? And it might come in to fight the thing because it considers it in its general targeting ideas. So it's like, okay, this is something considered not part of the village. It's considered a hostile mob by definition. I'm going to fight it. Or it's considered even neutral sometimes. It'll fight it. Actually, a good portion of the time. So, yeah, just think about that. Iron Golems are actually pretty good to use just because they're naturally aggressive. Although, with the whole Balrog thing, I was very surprised. I was very, very surprised that the Balrog did not just go for it. Like, seriously, would you not go for a Zoetor? Is this not something that you consider to be just not part of your faction? I mean... yeah. You just kind of chill here. You don't really consider it to be a thing. You're just like, nah, nope, not at all. In fact, you also don't even seem to go away on peaceful, so I need to think of something that big and problematic not going away on peaceful, and that's a bit of a thought. Now, I don't know if they'd actually fight you on peaceful, but you never know if somebody forgets to turn down the aggression when peaceful's on. That could be a thing. So, yeah, just think of that showing up and just wrecking everything with fire, and you get the idea. So, you can kind of see where I'm going there. There's a lot of conditions when it comes to me doing mob battles behind the scenes that I factor in. And there's just all these variables. But at the same time, I do try. I test things behind the scenes sometimes, and I like showing them off because it's part of just what I enjoy. I like doing mob battles. I like watching them happen. So that's why I decided to do this very special Mlog while just doing some along the way. Meanwhile, I think I've described a lot of how things go. From kind of the beginnings to the idea of concerning yourself with going from one end of the version spectrum to the other. The fact that sometimes you get little variables about how the AI quirks means somehow it's just not going to happen, even if you try to hit them with a mob battle stick. And that's another thing, is a lot of mods that have features like this have it kind of similarly. And then there's some that generalize, and I might try some of them more too over time, to see if maybe they do it in a different way that can force the things that previously weren't doing that to actually work. But a lot of those are also very new mods that do that. So they may or may not factor into anything older because of the fact that they just don't exist in these older versions. And as I've said before, sometimes versions themselves kind of break. As in, the mods sometimes just break. Like Wildcraft, I would love to use Wildcraft. I really would. But I can't seem to get it to work for some reason. I've done the most recent one, and I don't know how many versions back of Wildcraft I need to go for it to actually function. But for some odd reason, I can't get the thing to work at all. It's like, nope, just not working. It's like every file of it just... I don't know. If there's an exact version of that that actually works for you back here in 1.7.10, please tell me exactly the version on Forge that has it. Because I can't seem to figure it out on my own, and they're just not working at all. So can't use it no matter how much I want to, because it's just not going. So that is also a factor. But otherwise, I think that's pretty much everything, including the fact that I do kind of start things out with a baseline of points and kind of build in tiers from there. If something can beat something that can beat an indefinite amount of something, then obviously it's at a bigger tier, and even more, and more, and you kind of get how that builds on itself over time. So it's just kind of my headcanon when it comes to a scoring system there. And as you can imagine, you see a lot of the kaiju at the top. Even things that they don't necessarily define as kaiju, but let's face it. I mean, would you possibly, in any way, shape, or form, not define this guy, this enormous guy here, as a kaiju? I mean, his visible horizon has to be way past mine. Let's just put it that way. I mean, he is just way too tall. This cannot be anything less than a kaiju class. Just saying. Ray of Art, you are officially a kaiju. Especially in my book. Now, can I ever actually hit this guy with this thing either? I don't know. I don't know if I can actually hit him with a mob killer stick. Also, some creatures have the ability to defend themselves against weird forms of damage, and might not mob battle well against things that rely on them. Just a little miscellaneous factor to keep in mind that I may sometimes have to deal with, like something relying on, say, a very specific form of modded damage that doesn't normally mesh with another mod. That can be a thing that happens. Although now that we have vanilla actual ice damage, then that should be a little less common on the chilly end of things. Ice dragons. And, of course, frost moths. Just saying. Anyhow, with me kind of going over the basics of how I consider things, then, yeah, you can kind of get the point of how I kind of work things up. Like, for example, a witch can take down things that are considered bosses and mini-bosses. But things can regularly take down witches, like, say, a Ravager can just pound one by rushing them down. And that's just like an easy one there. And there's things definitely able to wreck Ravagers. And, of course, so you get, like, a tier above that. So it's like, well, how many witches can a Ravager take in a row? Like, let's say maybe 4 or 5, maybe 10. Well, if something can take down multiple Ravagers at once, you multiply that out. So let's say a Ravager could take down 10 witches, then something can take down 10 Ravagers. That's 100 points right there. So just think of how quickly that multiplies out, even if you're just going in multiples of 10 just to limit it. Like just saying that's where you just say stop on this number. Well, it adds up, it multiplies out really quickly, don't it? When you think of it that way. So yeah, there's factors that scores up real quick. So if you're wondering how I do my headcanon, I think I pretty much laid it out here pretty well. How we consider things starting, other conditions that can kind of play in, and of course some basic terms like ring outs and say forfeits and stuff. Now there's a one last thing I kind of didn't put out, but it's kind of implied. If they can't damage each other, or if they can't damage each other fast enough to get past their regen, it's basically a tie. Or under some other circumstances. There's other things, like remember how Ray of Art was summoning minions? If the minions take out the other one after they've been taken out, it's still a tie, because I factor in every aspect of the mob, including, like, say, the Wither's Heralding Blast. I consider that part of the dynamic. Summoning minions from Ray of Art, that's also a thing. I mean, they don't necessarily go out whenever you take down Ray of Art. They're still there. So if the minions still exist and they take them down, that was part of the mob's tactics. So that's a tie. Or if they somehow manage to take each other out simultaneously. Well, that's obviously a very dramatic tie. Some things even have death throws, like mutant creepers, in which case they might take things out with their last attack. So, yes, you can have all sorts of situations say, hey, that's it, that's a tie. So, there's all sorts of things that can happen in mob battles, and I think this kind of helped illustrate kind of my world when it comes to me making mob battles and enjoying them, and going, yeah, I'm cheering for this one, but, didn't work out how you thought, because you never know how things really go down, and there's a few invisible dynamics sometimes. Things may have resistances that you don't normally know, like witches and their odd resistance, because they can resist not only magic, but also poison and thorns. So that's why they specialize in some magical mob battles, is because they can actually stand up to things that have a great health count compared to their own, just because they can take the extra special kinds of damage that other things can't. They also regen. So you can have factors in fighting style, too. So always consider that there's always a bit more to it than you might think. Maybe a little behind the scenes? And this is why I've kind of wanted to do that this time, and in this special style. So, I think I'll be signing off for now. Hope to hear from you all later. And so bye for now, everybody. And remember, there will be more mob battles.